We are live.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Founder Hacks, our podcast where we cogitate and masticate over something we've seen, something we've read, and something we've learned that's been a source of inspiration for the founders that we're working with. Let me start by saying a massive welcome to the awesome Anthony Enright.
Hi Ben, hi Alex.
And an equally huge hello to the wonderful Alex Moore.
Thank you. I'm just wondering what the word masticate means. Is it rude?
Do you not know what masticate means?
No, tell me.
To chew,
to chew, of course.
Intellectually.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was a little bit concerned there as you started to say the word,
but please don't be. Well, guys, look, I think I'm going to kick us off this week with a little story, a little scene, something I've seen about a real business, and it kind of resonated with me a lot because it picks up on a theme that I've definitely experienced for much of my life, all of which has really been spent working with entrepreneurial and growing businesses. And this is a story about they're actually a couple running a business, a retail business to consumer business, and they've had a massive growth spike through lockdown, which is great. And on paper, you sort of look at their story to this point and you go, wow, that's going to be incredible, and aren't they going to be so happy? You know, they're about 8 years in already, so to hit that sort of growth, I mean, they've literally tripled through in just a few months, and you just think, wow, you know, you should meet these people and they should be on top of the world, right? But actually, somehow in this process, they've fallen out of love with their business, and they actually don't like it very much anymore. Huge growth, everything you'd think that you'd want, but somehow they've fallen out of love. And actually, as I was hearing the story, I kind of was worried for them because I've seen it before, and I've seen a lot of founders reach a point with their business where they've fallen out of love. I think maybe it's because if you're not careful, what you can end up with is, yes, you might have a fantastic business on paper, but actually your day-to-day existence is having a job you really hate. And I've seen it happen. And I guess the question that I had for you guys was, what do you do when you fall out of love with your business? So there we are, a little emotional one to start with. And I have a strong sense that Anthony Enright will have something to say about this. Anthony.
You're right, Ben, I do. I think what I find really interesting about this, and having gone through that myself, you know, having run one of my main businesses for, 18, 19 years is, typically you're not going to be in love with your business that whole time, right? And it's going to ebb and flow. But to answer your question, what do you do about it? What I found myself in the situation of, and having heard a little bit more about the story about the example, is that my experience is that you end up, especially through growth and scale, doing things that you don't enjoy doing. So you end up taking on tasks and taking on functions or responsibilities that aren't your strength, that don't make you smile. And all of a sudden, whilst you're seeing this massive growth and success, you're in a position where you're actually really miserable because your day-to-day is not as enjoyable. So to answer your question, what I did personally, I had a shake-up. I had a couple of right-hand people in my business, and we sat down and we worked through what were the elements of the jobs that we really enjoyed doing. And we were able to then move around. And I'm sure this idea came from Alex through one of our EO experiences, where we just sat down and worked out what we didn't enjoy doing that somebody else may enjoy doing. And what it led to was me realizing that actually what I loved doing was being client facing, out working with clients, working with our customers, seeing what they needed of us. And not only did that make me really, really happy, I spent a lot of time with my team on client site, and it revolutionized the business. We found a market that wasn't there before, simply by being out with our customers on site, led to about 40% growth, just literally by understanding our customers more. But the point is that I was doing what I really love to do. And I had other people in the business doing what I was doing before. And they were doing what they loved doing. So all of a sudden you have this growth where everyone's really enjoying the day to day. And it means that you end up hopefully delegating effectively and growing collectively. And it's just such a massive difference to me when I got out of that bad habits of doing stuff I wasn't good at, that drained my energy, that took me forever, to doing what I just love doing. So that's what I did, and that's what I see how other people are doing it to get out of it. It's just realizing that they're in a dead-end job in their own business because they don't enjoy it. What do you think, Alex?
Love that. Really struck a chord. Yeah. I mean, I think as a founder of businesses, I think, for me, it's the energy of the founder that drives a business. And when it's just the determination and energy and positivity. And, it is hard being the boss. It can be very lonely being the boss. And, falling in and out of love with your business is part of being the boss, and maybe shielding that from others is a very valid point. And I think, yes, Anthony, completely empathize with your position of focusing on what you love to do inside the business as a way of making you fall back in love with it. I've also thought that, to leave a business when you still love it is a key point for me. And I did that with my Thai food restaurant business that I set up with my wife. I left it when I loved it, when I still absolutely loved it. And I think that was a really good learning for me. And I would, I'm a big fan of doing that in business, to leave before you hate it. And if you hate it, there's two things you can do: reset or accept that fact and then leave. And I think I found, again, talking from experience, because we like to do that on this podcast, is I always try and not make a decision when I'm in a slump. So if I'm in a slump and I feel like I've fallen out of love my business, I wouldn't have made the decision to leave then. I would wait until I was on the up again. I got my energy, got my mojo back, and then maybe instigate that change. So that's what I wanted to add to throw it in there, Ben. But this was your topic of conversation. So did you want to kind of try and bring some of those ramblings together?
Yeah,
now?
I think it's really interesting to hear you both in terms of, I loved Anthony's delegate effectively and grow collectively, which is an interesting one, isn't it? And I think, of course, there's a part of me that, does every founder have the luxury of choice? Some do, some don't.
Yeah.
Depending on where they are in their growth journey.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And yet at the same time, I think Alex's point around don't make a decision when you're in a slump. I'm reminded of something I read recently, which is never make a decision if you're hungry, angry, or lonely, which I love.
Or all three at the same time.
Or all three. So yeah, don't make a decision when you're in a slump. But it's good to know as well that you both perhaps had experiences of falling in and out of love with your businesses. So it's good to know, even if you're in that situation, it can be fixed. But let's move on, because I think, Alex, you've read something that you'd like to share.
Yeah, it's funny. I've especially through my connections with EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, meet a lot of founders in there. A lot of people are reading stuff. What's the book you're reading? What's this? And people are looking for the next, the thing, the next big thing, the next. And I just came across something that actually dates back to 1918. And I loved it. It was a steel company. There was a guy named Ivy Lee. He was a productivity consultant. And he went into this company, the steel company, it's a big company, and said, I will help you improve your productivity. You don't need to pay me anything, but I will help you. Give me 15 minutes with all your senior management team, and I will revolutionize your business. And in the end, you can pay me what you like, which I really like. So off he went, and he just gave them all gave them a blank piece of paper and said, you're going to work like this from now on. At the top of your sheet, you draw a line in the middle of your bit of paper. And at the top of the paper, you write the 6 things that you are going to do today in order of priority. And you write your other notes down in the second half of the paper, but you just start at the top and you work your way down to the bottom. Anything you haven't finished by the day, on your next day, you add those on to, and they're the first things you deal on the next day. He got everyone doing it, and there was a massive uptick in productivity. And the CEO of the company ended up paying him, the equivalent of what is now, I'm just looking at my notes, it's like $400,000 in today's money, because he was so, and I just thought it was a lovely story. 1918, founders, Edge, and I just like this. So I wanted to throw it out to you guys. Are you a proponent of these things? Ben, you flashed your to-do list in front. There's this balance of technology and paper, and you were throwing your bits of scraps of paper in front of me on a Zoom call the other day, and I was just laughing. What are your thoughts on staying organized, using bits of paper and technology, and how would you do that? Who wants to go first?
Cool. I'm happy to jump in on this, because there's two things for me, right? I think I completely relate to every founder I've ever met tends to be so hungry for that. We've talked about silver bullets before on this podcast. Everyone's looking for that thing that's going to give them the edge. And you know what? This has been done, and we've been around this so many times. And guess what? In 1918, someone cracked it in this way. It's really simple. I'm not a fan of these. There are so many things out there, these methodologies, which are the 14 steps and 18 sub-steps, each of which has 3 stages that will deliver success for you. And I think the actual truth is that actually it doesn't matter what your methodology is. What matters is that you have one. And through that, you can control attention in the business and make sure it's in the right place. So I love what Ivy Lee did, because actually it didn't matter that the particular methodology was 6 things on a list and you rewrite that list every day. It didn't matter that was the methodology. The point was he put a methodology in place when there was none, I believe. And through that, you get improvement. So I love the simplicity of it. I think it's important to also know oneself. Some people are naturally really organized. I'm someone who's really not. I know I have to work at it. So I'm a complete to-do list nerd in terms of the tools I use and the way I do it, because I need to be. Some people are really lucky. They don't need to be. They're naturally organized. Knowing that you're not, and knowing what you need to do, I think is a big key to it. But yeah, that's what comes up for me here in that story.
I love that. And before we chuck this over to Anthony, I think, the other key point is that, the methodology, getting the buy-in of everyone to work the same way. And I think that was a key point. He got the execs of this steel company to all work in the same way. So I love what you said about, it doesn't matter what methodology you have, just as long as you have one. But I think the power of I've seen this firsthand, the power of everyone adopting that and working together can be very, very powerful. But anyway.
I have had the experience. So I was going to say, the experience I've had is, when you have different parts of your business on different operating systems, you can have a board running on Unix and the sales team are on MacOS. It just doesn't work at all. That sort of philosophically. Sorry, Anthony, over to you, mate.
Well, I'm glad you had your moment there, because I'm going to get on my soapbox on 2 things, right? Because the 2 most frustrating things I find as an entrepreneur for myself and how others do it is, one is complexity and one is productivity, right? And time again, I've been in situations where I've ended up with things that are so complex, they just blow my mind and I can't fix them. And I see it continually now with the companies that we work with and that I work with. And so for me now, I bang the drum. It's if you bump into somebody on the street and they ask you what the problem is and what you're dealing with, if you can't articulate that in 2 sentences, then it's too complex. So you've got to simplify what is going on. You've got to simplify, you've got to break it down and make it easy, bite-sized chunks. And that's how you deal with complexity, right? And I suppose the reason why I'm so passionate about it is because I get frustrated by complexity and I see others. So it's just simple to get to the point where you overcome the complexity. And the other thing is productivity, right? This is over 100 years ago. And yet, including myself, right? Including myself, I have this innate sort of thing that go, if I don't have a clean inbox, then I can't progress, I can't move on. And it stunts my productivity. And we have all these various areas that we have a phone that pings every 2 minutes. We have instant messengers that ping every 5 minutes. We have email that comes in, and it stops our productivity. And so especially during lockdown, as people have now got new habits or have had to change their habits to their work lifestyle. They're working harder and harder, and we've discussed it on this podcast before, but they're becoming less productive. So we actually had this conversation on Monday, didn't we? So we talked through what we're going to record on our podcast on a Monday. And I have had various contacts with various businesses, and I've mentioned this 3 times, the Ivy Lee method 3 times already, because we've got people who are under pressure, looking to be productive and reach their weekly objectives, and they're becoming stuck. And this is so simple. I love it. So I've now got 3 separate business owners working through the Ivy Lee method since our conversation on Monday.
Really?
Because so it's funny. It's obvious, isn't it? But it's so simple, but yet we just don't do it. We just don't do it. And what I love about it, and I'm not sure we've highlighted it, is that the detail of the method is that you write 6 things down for the following day, right?
Yeah.
But you're not allowed to do number 2 till you've done number 1. That's the rule. And you're not allowed to do number 3 till you've done number 2 and obviously number 1. So that's the rule. So you put that biggest, baddest thing that's been blocking you for weeks at the top of that list for tomorrow morning, and you have to get it done before you move on to number 2 and number 3. Because we all know the fear of doing it is far harder than natural. It takes us way less time than we thought it was for those big things to get done. And actually it's the small things that take longer. So it goes on number 1 on the list, and you do not allow yourself to do any more on that list till you've got number 1 done. It just frees us up. It's so liberating.
I like it. Well, that might be a good point to move on to learn. I believe, who's got that one? That would be Mr. Enright, isn't it? Okay.
Difficult one this week. Parted ways with a client over the last 7 days, and really, really tough. Been working with them through lockdown. Been incredibly close to them during that period. They've pivoted. They've worked incredibly hard to survive as an organisation. But we just hit a roadblock. We've just hit a roadblock where ultimately, and the line that I've got, which has come from our session on Monday, so I'm going to steal it from you, Alex, and you succinctly put it as, you can't teach people. People have got to learn, right? People have got to be willing to learn. And so for me, the biggest learning here is about timing. We got to a certain point, and the key decision makers in the business just weren't ready to see, and obviously it's just my opinion, but to see what was needed to be done next. And they just weren't ready for it. It just timing weren't ready. And they may or may not be at a certain point. And I'm not judging that, because I've been there myself, right? We all remember those growing up and parents or whomever telling you, don't do that, it'll end in disaster. But you have to do it. You have to do it. You have to test it for yourself. And then you realise, and they're shaking their head as they see you fail. But sometimes you just have to do it. And I think that's the experience here and the learn here, is that, is that sometimes you've just got to experience it for yourself, and you've just got to accept that it's about timing. And if you're not ready, you're not ready. And a real kind of hard lesson there, to just be in that sort of situation where you think you can see the answer, and others can't, but there's nothing more you can do. They've got to work it out for themselves. Bearing in mind, and that sounds quite arrogant, because it makes me sound like I'm right and they're wrong, and of course it may not be. But the reality is that, you've got to take the next steps to move on and see whether who's right and who's wrong. But until you're ready to see it yourself, it's a fruitless exercise. So a bit of a tough one this week. And Alex, what were your musings on that?
Yeah, to me, this thing about teaching and learning, I think as a founder of business, you've got to be quite brutal with who you spend time with. And time, it is probably one of the most precious things you can give someone. And you guys know I collect quotes. There's a guy named Edgar Kahn, who was the founder of this thing called Time Bank, where people donate time to each other and help in the communities. Very, very cool, very inspirational man. And I wrote this down about time, and it said the most precious thing you can give somebody is your time. That's your slice of eternity, and that's why you're giving. That's what you're giving up, and that's all you've ultimately got to give. And I think that's a really powerful thing, because you don't have time is important. If people aren't listening to you, if they're not learning, then cut them loose, focus on something else, and get your business moving with other people who do listen, who you can learn from, and you can learn from them, and they can learn from you. And I think, moments in my business when it gets stuck, I go back to that thing. Time is the most precious thing I have here for my business. I applied that you can apply that to your life and everything, all the people you spend time with. But anyway, that's what stuck in my mind. Ben.
I totally get all of that in terms of the approach, but where I went with this, I sort of went the opposite way with it. And I was like, wow, how do we make sure that we are learners? How do we keep ourselves open? And there's something in there for me about having the humility to be really open to learning. And you know what? The great founders that I've come across and met and know, they're very open to that learning. They actually do it a little bit quicker than other people. And I sort of went, actually, what's behind that? And it's got to be a level of humility. And is humility actually a superpower for founders? Because it makes sure you're not that person who is not yet ready to learn the next lesson. Because you know what, as a founder, you might not have time. You want to sit there being not ready to learn. Well, by the time you're ready to learn, your business could have fallen over and you've failed. So the opportunity for founders through being humble enough to learn from other people's mistakes and maybe avoid some also felt really powerful to me. So I kind of went in a different direction, but equally I completely agree. Yeah, there are times where actually somebody is in a place where they need some experience to do that teaching for them. They've got to go and learn it. They're not ready to be taught it. And actually being able to tell the difference is a key thing when you're building your team. So I took it there as well in terms of really hearing the stories Anthony related and go, oh crap, I hope that's not me who's sort of not ready to learn a really important lesson. How do I make sure that's not me? So really great one, and thanks for bringing it. Cool. So how would you wrap that up, Anthony? Lots to learn.
Yeah, I was kind of mesmerised there, Ben, by your by your take on it, because we're sometimes concerned, aren't we, that we all just agree with each other on this, and actually what we really want, and I'm sure people want to hear, is that diversity of thought and people coming at it from a different direction. So for you to think, oh crap, is that me that's hasn't listened or isn't taking it on, and actually, yeah, I absolutely agree with that you've got to continually look for, especially as you're advising others, right, and working with others, and it's just about as much learning for yourself as it is about them. And Alex, I think we've got to add that quote, right, about our time. And you've got to make quick decisions, right, because if you get to a point where, it's not just, for whatever reason, it doesn't need to be done with a whole heap of judgment, but if it's just not working, if it's just not connecting, if it's just not landing with that person, then they've got to find somebody that it does land with, and so do you. So make that decision, because time is precious, and move on and move forward. So on that note, Ben, I think it's over to you to wrap everything up for us.
Yeah, I think we're at time, gentlemen, aren't we? So, crikey, great thinking today. I think we've explored some fascinating areas. Can you delegate effectively and grow collectively and remain in love with your business? Can you adopt a single, simple operating system? Break it down, keep it simple, and stay productive. And finally, who gets a slice of your eternity? Who deserves to be taught by you? And when can you learn? And is humility a superpower to make sure that you're the one who's most open to learning? Well, gentlemen, I think that's been a wonderful little podcast this week. And I guess it remains to say a massive, massive thank you to Anthony Enright.
Thank you, Ben.
And a huge thank you to Alex Moore.
Thank you, and thanks for listening. I'm leaving in a very ponderous mood. So,
oh dear,
yeah, it's not necessarily a good thing. But
our
yeah,
poor
thanks,
listeners
guys.
pondering with us, I'm sure. But listen, absolutely, thanks everybody for listening to our podcast. As I always say, we love your feedback, we love your challenge, we love your experience shares. So if something we've shared today is of value to you or useful, or perhaps you disagree, do drop us a note at hello@atomics.co.uk. And of course, if you're enjoying what we're doing here, please do leave us those reviews on iTunes, because it helps us get more listeners, and it would be lovely to think that we can build a community around these experience shares to help founders all over the world. I've been Ben Thomas. We are Atomics. This has been Founder Hacks, and thank you very much indeed for listening.